Right now, we want to go to one of the world's top experts on the Middle East.
Brilliant man.
What?
A brilliant man.
Yeah. Our good friend. He's the head of ZOA, Zionist Organization of America, the president, and Mort Klein. It's very good to see you again, Mort, under these circumstances, which are very sad. But this is reality. What we just have to deal with it. How are you today, Mort?
Well, I'm really frightened for what's going on in America and what's going on in Israel. It's just astonishing that the world is essentially siding with the terrorists of Hamas and the terrorists of the Palestinian Authority. And this violence is based on a lie. The lie is that Israel is throwing out innocent Arabs from their homes for no reason. But in fact, in a nutshell, this was land the Jews bought over 100 years ago. Jordan stole it in the 48 war, threw the Jews out and brought Arabs in, banned Jews from living there. When Israel recaptured it in 67 war, they went to court. It was 50 years of litigation, believe it or not. And the courts repeatedly said, this is Jewish land. These Jews owned this land from before the 48 war. And they said the Arabs can live there, an astonishing concession, as long as they pay rent. And for years, the Arabs have refused to pay rent. And so finally, in the last few weeks, the court said, look, you don't pay rent, you're evicted. And we're talking about 48 people who refused to pay rent to the legal owners that a court ruled legally these Jewish people own. And when the court ruled this, the Arabs used this as a false pretense to start rioting. And ridiculous people started calling this genocide. Ilhan Omar and Tlaib, two of the biggest Jew haters we've ever seen in Congress, condemning Israel for throwing out people who won't pay rent. Anywhere in the world, if people refuse to pay rent, the courts will say, evict them. And that's all that's happened here. And so the world's response just shows that the world just has enormous enmity to the Jewish state and to Jewish people. This is pure anti-Semitism because the Arabs are acting horrifically here. And I'm shocked by Senators Warren of Massachusetts, Senator Sanders. Hello?
Yeah, we're here.
You're
I
here?
don't know where that's coming from.
Senator Sanders and Senator Warren have condemned Israel and said, stop the eviction. Warren's a lawyer, professor of law, and says that they shouldn't be evicted even though they're not paying rent. This is really unbelievable. By the way, Senator Murphy and Senator Coons have chimed in saying, don't evict these people. In other words, they're getting involved in a local Israeli matter of a court ruling that's illegal for them to live there if they don't pay rent. And the world is just not making any sense because of their extraordinary hatred toward Jewish people. That's all. That's the way I see it.
All right. Well, you used two. Thank you for the analysis of the problem going on in that Jewish community, the Arab community, right next to Jerusalem. But
it's part of Jerusalem. It's part of Jerusalem.
It's part of Jerusalem. Yeah, of course.
Sheikh Jarrah is part of Jerusalem.
You used two words. You said false pretense. We could build a 2-hour show over the false pretenses that have been an opportunity for the Arabs to go after the Israelis, the Jews. Let's just dig down a little bit more. False pretense. Then what is their real pretense? If the false one is this housing situation, rental situation, what's the real pretense for a war that has broken out in Israel now?
The real pretense, the real reason, this is a long, mega decade war against the Jewish state. The most in the Arab world, especially the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, want to destroy the Jewish state of Israel. This is the goal. Abbas, nobody writes about this. Mahmoud Abbas, the dictator of the Palestinian Authority, has been there 16 years, has publicly urged confrontation, increased confrontation, And it said, aim your bullets well, make sure they hit their targets. He said this publicly, and yet nobody condemns him for it. Imagine Netanyahu said something like that against for Israelis to act this way. The world would go crazy. So the goal is to kill Jews and destroy the Jewish state. It's nothing less than that. That's what this is all about.
Mort, we have a real concern here at the United West. We spend a lot of time in Israel. Dr. Ronnie Wexler, in fact, he's going to be on right after you. And I'll bring him on in a minute to say hello to you, Mary. You can cue up Ronnie. But we have real concerns that if this thing continues in Israel, there's going to be a call nationwide, worldwide, and in America for the Arab street to start protesting. And we've seen this past summer that the Black Lives and Antifa street has been joined by Islamic jihadis. What are your concerns about what could happen here in America if this spills over?
Joe Biden has appointed numerous people to high posts that affect the U.S.
Mort, excuse me 1 second. Ron, you got to mute yourself.
I got it.
Okay, go ahead, Mort.
Joe Biden and his far left supporters have appointed the strongest anti-Israel people to high posts that we've ever seen. One after the other is hostile to Israel. Never seen anything like this. He has now reinstituted giving taxpayer money to the terrorist dictatorship, the Palestinian Authority. $250 million he's now sending to them, encouraging terrorism. So we've never seen such a decline in support for Israel of the U.S. administration as we have now under, I call this the Barack O'Biden administration. I believe this is really Obama and the far left controlling Biden. I believe they're telling Biden, if you don't do what we say, we're going to invoke the 25th Amendment and get rid of you. And so Biden is just going along with whatever they want. That is my opinion. So I'm worried that Israel is going to begin to realize they can't depend on America, God forbid, and they're going to have to go their own way and to protect themselves. That's what's happening right now.
All right, here's what we're going to do, Mary. Mary is managing the guests out of Atlanta. Mark has a question for Mort. Then we're going to bring Ronnie on to comment on some of what Mort has said. So first, Mark's question, then we'll bring Ronnie on.
Hi, Mort. How you doing?
Hi.
Thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate it. I mean, we appreciate your insights.
I love being on with clear thinking patriots.
Amen. Amen.
Well, I just want to explain, make sure absolutely clear what we're talking about, that the reason for the Arabs attack. And what I know as a Christian, all right, not as a Jew, just looking at it from a third party stance, I see it as this is a pathological hatred of Jews. So in the same sense as a genocidal Nazi type of hatred towards Jews, where they want to put them in the gas chambers when they say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free of Jews. There is no, nuclear bomb over top of Israel is quite okay with them. Am I right in thinking that way, or can you help me out?
Mort, hang on, Mort. Listen to this. Let me put this thing on here. Live as we're speaking, Mort. Every time one of these sirens go off, a missile is being fired from Gaza. As we're talking about this, bombs are raining down on southern Israel right now, Mort.
These are missiles and rockets provided for and paid for by Iran. And the reason they have so much funds available for this is because of Barack Obama's disgraceful Iran deal that gave the Iranian terrorist regime $150 billion, which they're using to fund terrorists, including Hamas. This was the most horrific deal anyone's ever made on behalf of the people, this Iran deal. But no,
actually, to Tell me the action. Am I more correct to think that they have a genocidal hatred of Jews?
When Hamas and Fatah, the Palestinian Authority, talks about going after Israel, they talk about going after Jews. They don't say Israelis, they say Jews. This is Jew hatred. The Quran preaches hatred of Jews, I'm sorry to say. And their goal is to continue having this war against Israel and to push for a one-state solution where suddenly there'll be another 2 million Arabs as part of Israel, ending it as a Jewish state. This is their goal. And let me tell you something interesting. There's never been a country called Palestine. Never. This was a region. Never been, no Palestinian kings or queens, no Palestinian currency. And let me tell you something else interesting. The word Palestine, it's a Roman name. If this is an Arab land or Arab country, why is it named using a Roman term, Philistinia, Palestine? Because this was never an Arab country. This was Judea and Samaria. This was a Jewish country under King David thousands of years ago. So this is one of the great lies that this is Arab land, when in fact, this is called Judea and Samaria. We Jews are from Judea. It's not the West Bank, it's Judea and Samaria. We are Judeans. Jew is a contraction of the word Judean. That's why we're called Jews, because we're from Judea, which many people know as the West Bank.
All right, Dr. Ronnie Wexler, you're on with your friend Mort Klein. Is he off into space saying that Jews are from Judea? You were born in Israel, Ron. What's going on here?
We don't have him. He's not.
Oh, what happened to Ronnie?
He's got to unmute.
You got to unmute, Ron.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There you go. There you
Put
go.
your video
Bring your
on.
camera on as well, Ronnie.
Turn your camera on, Ron.
Am I on?
All right.
Well, Tom, good morning. I have to correct you. I wasn't born in Israel. I was born in Palestine.
Oh, that's right.
I was born in 1947, so it was Palestine, and you saw my father's passport.
That's right.
British passport, Palestina. It says on it. I didn't hear the whole dialogue that you had there with our friend. I think he's from Israel. Is that correct?
No, I'm from Philadelphia.
And you're speaking now from Philadelphia?
I'm speaking from Philadelphia.
Okay, good. Well, for the little that I heard, obviously I have to concur that is absolutely true. The situation in Israel, unfortunately, was kidnapped from real estate issue and civil law that should be very easily resolved into something that Israel never had seen before. And the reason I'm saying that is that for the first time, I think Hamas, and we shouldn't take them lightly, was smart enough to kidnap the Al-Aqsa issue and make it into the big war. So not only that this is a problem now between us and Hamas or the jihad groups in Gaza or the Fatah faction in Judea and Samaria, we have now a war that is going into the heart and soul of every Muslim in the world. And I'm afraid that we are going to hear from countries that we never really heard before in the way of condemnation of Israel. I think that what we always used to say, this is cultural warfare, spiritual warfare. It is truly now a religious warfare. It's almost like the Crusades, you know, like this is our mountain, we have to clear it from Jews, or this is our mountain and we can share it with everybody, which is the Jewish stand. I think that what we see now is not going to be resolved that easily. We are in a situation now that I know, Tom, you said that you, on your cell phone, seeing attacks on Israel, and every time there's a siren, you hear it too, here in Florida. Situation is dire. An entire city in the south of Israel was told, in no other certain terms, to stay home in shelters. That's the city of Ashkelon, of 130,000 people. I looked at some of the media coverage on different stations here, whether it's in America or in Europe. It's slanted so badly. The poor Palestinians are being hurt, and there are so many being killed. And on the other side, it said, and Israel claimed that it had, so many wounded. I mean, this is crazy. It's just insane. The fact is that there's no such thing as surgical warfare. When people are shooting at you from highly dense populated communities, and you have to go after them because they're killing your own families. What do you expect to do? But whatever we explain now just is falling on deaf ears. We never been very good at our public relations worldwide. I mean Israelis, and we are not going to be good at it now either. But
hang on one second, Ron. I'm letting this thing play, the alerts that we get from Israel, to purposely disrupt us as we're talking.
This is real time.
Yeah, the sirens are disrupting us in the comfort of Philadelphia and Florida and our studio. But every time this thing goes off, it impacts families in the towns that we've been in.
There's another one.
Here goes another one. Many, many times. Let's bring in Barry Shaw, who is in Israel right now. And Barry, you're on with Dr. Ronnie Wexler and Mort Klein, the president of ZOA. Mort, do you know Barry Shaw from Israel?
I know the name. I don't know him personally. Glad to meet him.
And I also want to say to Mort Klein, and we want to thank you for the whole of Israel for the excellent work. I know you're putting yourself out on the line quite often for ZOA on behalf of Israel. I know you get a lot of incoming from it, but I want to tell you your voice is vitally important to everybody here in Israel. And Israel Institute of Strategic Studies certainly salute the work that you're doing, almost single-handedly.
Thank you so much. It means so much to me because I am bitterly attacked, not by Arabs, not by Muslims, by fellow left-wing Jews.
Yes. I want to talk about in more detail, about you and I together on Tom and another program, because this is an issue I've been dealing with, and I'll be dealing with it on an online Zoom event I've got to do in a couple of hours' time, where I'll be pointing to the American Jews of one of the enemies of Israel right now, as strongly as that.
Hi, Barry. Ronnie just laid out that we're looking at a conflagration that has medieval tones to it. Before we get into that, give us a real-time update as to what happened overnight, what's happening.
Right. I'll give you an one. I just want to say very quickly, though, to Ron, that I disagree with one part, because I heard what Ron said about the Arab world picking sides now between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority because Hamas has made Jerusalem a target. I think this is going to backfire on Hamas. You know why? Because I think a lot of the moderate Arab and Muslim world will be very angry at Hamas, who claim they're defending Jerusalem by firing rockets at Jerusalem. I would imagine that most of the moderate Arab world will be very angry at a terrorist organization claiming they're defending, as I said, the holy city by firing rockets at it. That's as far as a different aspect of this.
I don't know. That's a good
going
discussion point. But give us.
Anyway, let me just go up to date, because before joining you, believe this or not, I heard somebody from the Gaza Strip talking on Israeli television, and he was saying that there is a war of attrition going on between Hamas and the Palestinian authorities. And they're carrying out this war of attrition, a political war of attrition for dominance over the Palestinian society. And both sides are targeting Israel instead of each other in this war of attrition. That's a different, interesting axis. Welcome to the wild Middle East, Tom. It makes common sense. It does to the Palestinians and Hamas. But anyway, the update I can give you is almost some sad news, because I don't know if you covered it or not, but I can tell you there have been 2 casualties, 2 deaths in Ashkelon from direct Hamas rockets striking buildings. A number of serious people have been seriously injured. And as of 10 minutes ago, Benjamin Netanyahu came out of a security cabinet meeting. By the way, Hamas, when they heard about the deaths, started celebrating victory from Gaza and saying, now it's time to have a ceasefire and stop maybe the firing. Just so happens that Benjamin Netanyahu came out of a security cabinet meeting and he announced that the cabinet, the Israeli cabinet, have decided to, in fact, increase the targeting on Hamas. The game isn't over so far as Israel is concerned. There are still very valuable targets for us to hit, and our intention has been to degrade Hamas, and we have another few days. We're going patiently through the bank of targets, and we're knocking them off one after the other. The latest casualty I can tell you is the military commander of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket brigade. He was targeted. There's a video of the targeting of his home on my social media site if you want to see it.
And I want to bring up a quick point about this only occurred. I mean, Trump defunded everybody in the
Palestinian Authority.
Palestinian Authority, and Biden turned around now has given them $300 million, reinstated that, and all of a sudden, oh my God, they're firing rockets again. Is there any correlation there?
You're getting me riled up, aren't you? You're getting me really riled up. Because I mentioned to Tom just the other day, the Biden administration have started refunding the terror-supporting Palestinian authorities who give their money to reward their terrorists in defiance of the Taylor Force Act, which is still in law in America. And yet the Biden administration have flouted American law and giving your money, your taxpayers' money, to the terror-supporting Palestinian Authority.
But when you go in, if you look at the whole West Bank area, as they call it, or Judeo-Samaria, as it should be called, and you go back to the 1967 and after, people from Israel started building stuff, started creating roads, houses, buildings, roads, infrastructure. All that infrastructure, road infrastructure, wasn't built by the PA, wasn't built by the Arab nations, it was built by Israel. And all the money that's ever given in that whole area has gone to infrastructure, building, roads, universities. All the money that has gone to the PA has gone into building tunnels to go into Israel to blow it up and make bombs. And two different mindsets.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to add, and this applies to you guys in the studio and to Mr. Klein also, that when you hear your people like Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, your representative in the United Nations, talk about a conflict between Israel and the Palestinian occupied territory, it's us and the Palestinian Authority. We better make peace with the Palestinian Authority or there can't be peace without it. You'll notice that what is vacant, what is empty, what is missing from this narrative is the word Hamas. Hamas, the reason that the Palestinian elections were cancelled, because Hamas was on their way of winning the election. No. And next time any of you are speaking to your officials over there and they refuse to talk about Hamas, they've backed it out, you can tell them that Hamas is the one that's controlling the conversation in the Palestinian street. And if they think that making peace with Mahmoud Abbas is peace, forget about it. It's the same deceptive language. And I want your American official and your American media to start telling the truth, telling the uncensored truth about what's going on over here. Hamas exists. It's the elephant in the room, and you can't make it disappear.
All right. Well, that raises several issues. Mort, first a question to you, then a question for Ronnie. But it is 9:42, 9 o'clock in the morning, 42 minutes after 9, East Coast time, Florida, Philadelphia time, 4:42 in Israel, 7-hour difference. Right now, things are winding down, but as we've seen at nighttime, the missiles keep firing. Ron, the question to you, after I get to Mort first, this is Tom Trento hosting an ongoing broadcast. We will be here every morning at 9 o'clock live We'll go 1, 2, 3 hours, whatever the facts on the ground dictate. We'll come back in the afternoon if we have to. Nobody in this country is going to cover this critically important development in the Middle East like we will, because they don't want to. They simply don't want to or don't have the capability to. But Ron, after I go to Mort, the question to you, if Barry is correct and the Hamas is running this thing, would it be strategically wise to go after Ismail Haniyeh, the head of Hamas? I know the IDF is going after mid-level commanders. Strategically, would it be wise or not to go after the head of the snake? Hang on to that. Mort, question to you is, you're running a large, significant organization, Zionist Organization of America. What is your message? You're an eloquent individual that writes extensively. And leads a large group. What is your message right now to your folks in America and worldwide?
Basically, people should realize this is an Arab-Muslim war against Israel, the US, and the West. The goal of Iran and other radical Muslim Arab countries is to Islamicize the world. That is their goal. The goal is Israel's destruction and US destruction. Iran every day has rallies screaming death to America and death to Israel, not just death to Israel. So this is an Arab war against Israel. This is not about a state. Remember, it's not about a Palestinian state. Israel, under Ehud Barak and Ehud Olmert, twice has offered statehood on virtually all of the disputed territories. And not only did they reject it, they went to war and started an intifada, a terror war, starting to murder Jews. They could have had a state many times over. They don't want it, because getting a state, they have to sign a clause saying no further war against Israel, no further conflict, and no Arabs are allowed to move into Israel from the Judea and Samaria. They refuse to sign this, and the world should understand that Mahmoud Abbas and Fatah are as bad as Hamas. They have the same goals. They don't have missiles. If they did, they would use them. Remember, it's Abbas who pays Arabs to murder Jews. And the more Jews and Arab murders, the higher their lifetime pension. And the pension is 5 times the average salary of a Palestinian. It is very lucrative to murder Jews. Imagine if Netanyahu paid Jews to murder Arabs. The world would go ballistic. Yet this is what Abbas is doing, and it's basically ignored. Abbas and Fatah, they name schools and streets and sports teams after Jew killers. They glorify Jew killers in their society whenever they die. So we should understand they are working together. The difference between Hamas and Fatah is that they want the power. It's not that they have a different goal. They have the identical goal. So it's not just Hamas, it's Fatah and much of the Arab Muslim world, I'm afraid. Even now, the countries Israel just made peace deals with, Bahrain and UAE, they've condemned Israel for retaliating. They have condemned Israel for retaliating, as opposed to telling the truth that it is the Arabs that started this. It's the Arabs that are doing this under the false pretense of, for God's sakes, legally evicting people who refuse to pay rent. It's a minor local issue, and they've used this as a pretense to start killing Jews.
All right, crazy situation. Ron, again, Tom Trento with J. Mark Campbell here, hosting a show. You don't look like Susie Gold.
Susie Gold.
No,
Not Susie Gold.
She'll be back tomorrow live. We miss her dearly. But we will have a very lovely woman on toward the end of the show. We have Jerusalem Jane in Jerusalem, who's been doing. She's in Jerusalem. She's been doing great reporting from the Damascus Gate, from Jerusalem. Very brave woman there. We'll bring her on in a little while. But Ron, strategically, the question, and Barry, after we speak to Ronnie, I want you to answer Iran's role in all of this.
Please do,
so, Ron, strategically, did Israel go after the heads of the snakes?
Well, I think I agree with what we just heard. Israel is practically the West last line of defense. There's no question about it. So if we have to go against the enemy that comes to annihilate us or to break that line of defense, I think all rules are open, and if we have to go against the head, we go against the head. If somebody else comes in, we get rid of him too. I firmly believe that yes, we need to go after the heads of the organizations, and they are the ones that usually don't risk themselves at all. They don't even live in the area. But I want to bring another something that maybe
Wait, hang on 1 second, Ron, because we have viewers, and then we'll be sending this out who may not know you. Dr. Ronnie Wexler is speaking now. You hear the accent there. It's an Israeli accent. He was born in Palestine, as he said, before 1948, which was still Israel. And he is a scholar with advanced degrees in Jewish and Christian theology. And he spent most of his adult life organizing. He has a very substantial tour company, and we go on our United West tours through heritage study programs, and we're going to be continuing them in the near future. Ronnie has spent most of his life bringing Jews and Christians together. He's taken over 100,000 people, Jewish and Christian leadership, to Israel to understand the Holy Land, what it's all about. So he's a very peaceful guy. So when he's talking, when he's talking about, if necessary, go after the heads of the snake, this isn't some radical fanatic. He's a very peaceful guy. But when called on in 1967, when called on in 1973 as a young guy to defend his country, he answered the call. He trained, picked up his weapons, and went into combat against the Arab countries in 1967 that invaded Israel, and against the Arab countries in 1973, and has the scars to show that. So you're listening to an individual who understands both sides, war and peace, and who prefers peace over war. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, well, thank you for the introduction. I'm a very peaceful man, and I remember the days that we sat with I used to go shopping in Gaza, in the market, and became friendly with some of the shopkeepers there, as the ones I introduced you all in Jerusalem as well. So yeah, peace is possible, but the agenda that Hamas has is not peace. And unfortunately, we also have a Trojan horse in Israel, a fifth column of 20% Arab citizens of Israel. Most of them, I would like to believe, are friendly, but I know quite a few that aren't. And yesterday, and I did see it in any of the local media here in the United States, the city of Ramleh, not Ramallah, but Ramleh, which is a Jewish city in Israel, and Lod, which is the adjacent city to Ben Gurion Airport, were a war zone between Arab communities and Jewish communities. In fact, it ended with one death. And so when push comes to shove, and you create from this, as said before, just a civil incident of people that don't want to pay rent for houses that don't belong to them. Now it's a religious war, and we're taking Al-Aqsa, and you unite all these people against Israel, just like as you said in biblical times. This is a major problem. We need to stop it. And we have a crazy situation in Israel. We don't have a government, and everybody's bickering, and they don't find the place, and they argue about nonsense. But now it's the time to come together and make a stop to that. Over 250,000 people now in Israel are under barrage of rockets. Any moment, something can happen, either in Ashkelon or Sderot or Ashdod. Those are big cities. We need to stop the nonsense, come to the point, and give the right answer. And I believe the right answer today, and as you said, I'm a soldier. Right answer is to go after the head and destroy and slowly make sure that you clean the trenches. That was my understanding of what was my role in the war. Go and clean the trenches. Make sure the enemy is not there to shoot at you. That's all. If it needs to go to the head, you go to the head. And then you go after everybody else. But you can't let it go. There's no way this can continue the way it continues now.
Benny
Yeah.
Gantz just approved more airstrikes into Gaza.
Right
That's
now?
huge. That's huge. Because he's not the far right person in the world, right?
Yeah, Benny Gantz, who, well, we'll get that update from Barry. Thanks, Ron. We're gonna go to Barry. Then I'm gonna ask each of you for 1 or 2 minute closing thought. And then after you guys leave, we're gonna bring Jerusalem Jane on to give the woman's perspective of what's going on out there. But Barry, I think it was 2014 Operation Protective Edge. We had to cancel our normal Ronnie Wexler tour that summer, but I came anyway in August, and I went up to Narim, to the kibbutz right next to Gaza, and it was where the last, after a treaty, a peace deal, a ceasefire was called. Hamas did their typical firing, like the end of the fireworks show, a barrage of rockets, and they hit an electrical tower, put the power out for Narim, and the AC went down, and the kids were getting all hot. So 3 or 4 of the men went out to see if they can repair it, and a missile hit right on the spot where they were working and killed one of them, and I think the 1 or 2 of the others lost their legs. Well, when I was at that spot where the missile hit, my host pointed out to me the wife of the gentleman who was killed, and this was just so earlier. I asked if I could interview her, and I interviewed her with a translator, and I have never aired the footage. I just felt I shouldn't air it. It's in Hebrew, and but I'm looking at the red alert, and Narim is getting hit again as we speak, and I'm very familiar. And obviously Ronnie's familiar, and Barry's familiar, and probably Mort, he's been there, Mark's been there, of what's going on. But Barry, give us the role of Iran in all of this.
Yeah, before I get to that, I want to make a very important point on your program. And I want to ask you at United West and also Mort Klein at ZOA. I'm going to make a very important point over here. Palestinian Hamas, unprovoked, is now firing rockets into Israel's civilian centers, killing people, including an elderly woman, and injuring many, including kids. This is a war crime. Palestine, believe it or not, is a member of the International Criminal Court. The International Court is about to launch war crimes investigations against Israel for what you said, Operation Protective Edge. I want to appeal to you and your connections and your influences, yours and Mr. Klein as well, to go to international lawyers and jurists and make a case to the International Criminal Court that one of their members, the Palestinians, have been now, as we speak, conducting war crimes. If they intend to hold war crimes against Israel on past charges put to them by terrorist organizations like the Palestinian Authority and Hamas, it's up to respectable lawyers and respectable organizations to put a petition to the International Criminal Court and demand that they investigate Hamas and the Palestinians for the war crimes they're conducting right now.
Good point.
It's a very good point.
Good point.
What do you think, Mort?
Of course, I agree fully with Barry Shaw. I would urge people to write to their congressmen and senators, tell them, one, stop sending $300 million to the terrorist regime of the Palestinian Authority. This is simply paying money to support terrorism. We have to condemn the false pretense of a local issue of evicting people who don't pay their rent, and we should condemn it. We should be supporting Israel fully. We should urge publicly to stop Abbas from naming schools, streets, sports teams, children's camps after Jew killers. They glorify and honor Jew killers. Here we're tearing down statues of George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. Well, they're erecting statues to Jew killers, and the world is saying nothing. We have to condemn Mahmoud Abbas by name for this. And we have to understand this is a religious war by Muslim Arabs against the Jewish state of Israel. That's unfortunately what it is. And Iran is one of the leaders behind it because of the money they have and the armamentarium they have that they're giving to Hamas and other terrorist groups around the world. They are the leading funder of Islamic terrorism on earth. And here, Joe Biden wants to reinstate the deal and get rid of all sanctions against Iran. We must fight to stop reinstating the Iran deal, which will only strengthen Iran and will not, that deal will allow Iran to have nuclear weapons in a few years. It's an outrageous mistake. We have to fight against this.